The dam I spent 3 years building was being chewed apart by a skid steer driven by a guy in cargo shorts, while Karen stood 5 feet away in Lululemon holding a crystal and blasting meditation music from a Bluetooth speaker. She wore a sash that said Storm Whisperer and declared, "The clouds obey those who manifest." I stood on the hill, soaked, stunned, clutching cold coffee and watching HOA logic try to battle hydrology with Wi-Fi and spiritual energy. She wore a tiara, a sash that read, "Water is HOA property," and a smile like she just won a pageant for tyranny while my dam lay in splinters behind her. I was still holding my coffee. Black, no sugar. Though it had turned cold somewhere between the sound of shattering timber and the sight of a backhoe claw resting smugly in the smoking crater that used to be my retention wall, there they were, 3 HOA board members, seated neatly on folding chairs like they were front row at a demolition derby hosted by Satan himself. Karen, of course, was center stage, one leg crossed over the other, pink sunglasses perched high on her head like she was about to critique a landscaping segment on HGTV. Her sash fluttered in the breeze. Yes, a real satin sash, like she'd just claimed dominion over Poseidon's personal reservoir. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Words were still loading. My dam, the one I'd designed, engineered, and built with my own 2 hands over the course of 3 years, was gone. Not damaged, not altered, obliterated. Like it had personally offended someone's HOA-approved lawn gnome. And there was dust, so much dust. It hung in the morning light like stage smoke, and for a moment I half expected a magician to step out of the haze and pull a signed cease and desist letter from his hat. But no, just Karen sipping iced coffee from a mason jar the size of a fire extinguisher. "You're welcome," she called, raising her cup like she was toasting my sanity. This whole area looks so much more harmonious without that swamp fortress thing. Swamp Fortress, that thing had prevented 3 separate runoff events from turning her beloved cul-de-sac into a slip slide of mulch and regret. I blinked again, still barefoot, still in flannel pajama pants that had seen better laundry cycles. I didn't reply, not yet. I turned and walked back inside, calmly, quietly. Then I came out again with my phone, ready to pull the footage from my trail cams, only they were gone, not just the SD cards. Gone. Mounts ripped from the trunks. One post had been snapped clean in half, the bracket dangling like a snapped neck. The third had been smashed against a rock so thoroughly I could see plastic embedded in the bark. That's when my spine started to chill. This wasn't vandalism. This was a cleanup job. Someone didn't just want to destroy my work. They didn't want proof it had ever existed. Karen was now talking to the other board members, gesturing animatedly toward my ridge like she was pitching a timeshare. One of them, Greg, I think, laughed way too hard for someone whose landscaping would soon be reclassified as riverbed. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, but I knew one thing: this wasn't over. Because you don't just demolish 3 years of engineered infrastructure during monsoon season and expect the dirt to stay quiet. And you sure as hell don't erase a man's dam and call it landscaping, especially not when that man still has the original blueprints, a backup trail cam in the pump housing, and a very good attorney who once described HOA bylaws as a legally binding fairy tale written by bored suburbanites with control issues. The war hadn't started that morning, but someone had definitely fired the first shot. People think building a dam is just stacking rocks and praying to YouTube tutorials. It's not. It's soil density reports, slope gradation, runoff modeling, and more paperwork than a mortgage application during tax season. When I started the project, I didn't build it to impress anyone. I built it because no one else would. The Briarwood Hills HOA had planted hydrangeas, but nobody bothered asking why their backyards turned into koi ponds every few years. You see, my land sits just above Briarwood, up on a quiet ridge where cell reception is spotty, but the view is divine. It's a patch of old hill country with stubborn soil and stubborn people. And for 3 solid years, I became the most stubborn of them all, hauling rebar, pouring gravel, laying each stone by hand with a level and a grudge. I designed the whole thing myself, ran the specs by my late uncle, a retired Army Corps engineer who thought building codes were suggestions for the weak and then got it signed off by 3 agencies: County Flood Control, Water District, and the Office of Soil and Drainage. Not one permit. 3 laminated, filed, framed. The dam wasn't some monstrosity. It was a reinforced earth barrier with a spillway, gravel buffer, and a French drain system cleaner than Karen's HOA ledger. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. Rain came and the surge didn't. For 2 years, Briarwood stayed dry, which is why it took them a while to even notice it existed. Then Karen moved in. She arrived like a weather system, sudden, self-important, and full of warnings. Day 1, she handed out HOA welcome packs with passive-aggressive notes about mailbox uniformity. Week 2, she got elected HOA president in what I can only assume was an uncontested landslide of apathy. By week 4, she had questions. Not about the drainage maps or runoff rates. No, she wanted to know why her peonies weren't floating away like they did in April 3 years ago. She suspected something. Then came the day she crossed the property line. I was pruning blackberry vines by the trail when she appeared, wearing pristine white jeans and espadrilles, holding a clipboard like it could summon thunder. She didn't wave. She just pointed downhill. "I'm here about the structure," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the ridge where the top edge of the dam wasn't even visible. "It's not in harmony with the natural aesthetic of the neighborhood." I wiped sweat off my brow and said, as evenly as I could, "This ain't the neighborhood, ma'am. This is my land." And the structure is legal, permitted, and functional. She blinked like I'd just spoken Latin. "But it looks unnatural," she said, frowning at the retaining wall that blended so well with the terrain even deer walked past it without noticing. "It holds back floodwater," I replied. "You want it to look like a Monet painting or to stop your gazebo from floating into the next county." Her eyes narrowed. "If there's no water there, what are you even trying to hold back?" There he was, that special brand of HOA logic. If nothing bad's happening, clearly nothing needed to be fixed. That night, I told my buddy Jack over beers, I knew the minute she wore white pants to a muddy trail we were in for it. And I was right, because some people see a dam and think safety. Karen, she saw a threat to the neighborhood's visual symmetry. And a woman who thinks symmetry trumps physics, that's someone you don't turn your back on. It started with a letter, not a polite inquiry, not even a formal complaint. Just a bright pink envelope slid under my gate with the HOA logo and the phrase "courtesy notice" printed like a threat in cursive. I opened it thinking maybe it was a misplaced flyer or some absurd invitation to a mulch-themed block party. Nope. It was my first violation. Reason? Unauthorized earthwork within community visual corridor. That's not a joke. That's what it said, bolded and underlined, like I had somehow interfered with their HOA-approved view of the wilderness. I laughed, and then I framed it, but they didn't stop there. Over the next month, the letters kept coming like they were on a timer. Violation 2, unpermitted water containment structure. Violation 3, disruption of suburban rainfall patterns. Violation 6, and I quote, accused me of storing liquid without community consensus. By violation 9, I stopped counting and just labeled a drawer Karen's greatest hits. Let me remind you, my property isn't in the HOA. It never was. Never paid dues, never signed covenants, never attended a single meeting in their beige clubhouse with low-calorie cookies and unlimited microaggressions. But Karen, in her royal ambition, had decided that adjacency was the same as jurisdiction. She escalated quickly. Flyers started appearing around the neighborhood. Warning, unauthorized reservoir nearby, flood risk imminent, structure unmonitored, built without approval. The title? The Shadow Pond. Like I was hosting illegal fish fights in the woods. One flyer even had a poorly photoshopped image of my dam with lightning bolts added in. It looked like a trailer for a horror movie called Aquageddon. And the worst part, people believed it. HOA residents started crossing the street when I drove by. One lady whispered, "Runoff radical," as I walked past the community garden. Vince from Lot 9 refused to make eye contact at the feed store. That one hurt. I didn't retaliate, not yet. I just started collecting. Every notice went into a binder, every flyer scanned and cataloged. I installed extra trail cams, hid redundant motion recorders inside the control box of the dam, even welded the gate chain shut like I was prepping for siege warfare. I thought I was being paranoid. I thought the worst was behind me. Then came the sign. I returned from my weekly supply run, dog food, diesel, and a six-pack apiece, and saw it staked right at the base of the ridge, laminated, flapping in the wind like a flag raised over stolen territory. It read, "Removal of unauthorized structure per Article 6.3, Briarwood HOA, board action approved. No date, no signatures, just that smug corporate HOA header and a list of vague action items like mitigate disruption and restore natural aesthetics." I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there staring at the sign like it was an omen carved by idiots. Because that's when I knew this wasn't a turf war. This was a purge. And I'm sure they had no idea what the next rain would bring. You thought that was the climax? I did too, till that sign greeted me right in the middle of my own land. 2 days, that's all it took. I left town for 48 hours, just enough time to wear a tie, drink some bad champagne, and watch my cousin get married under a tent that nearly blew over mid-vows. I should have been worrying about the ring bearer eating dirt. Instead, I was losing a day. Before leaving, I did everything right. Inspected the spillways, cleared the debris from the gravel filter, reinforced the south edge with packed shell, left a laminated sign at the trailhead, private property, do not enter, monitored by camera, structure under county permit, and I welded the access gate shut, literally with a blowtorch. Overkill? Maybe. But paranoia was starting to feel like wisdom. I got back Sunday evening, the air thick with humidity and something else. Off. You know that smell in your fridge when you can't quite place what died? Yeah, it was like that, but in the sky. I hiked up the ridge, expecting maybe a blown valve or maybe some wildlife damage. But the second I crested the slope, my stomach dropped like a bad stock portfolio. The dam was gone, bulldozed, flattened like it had offended someone's HOA sensibilities just by existing, stone timber, drain piping, shredded and scattered like a DIY apocalypse. The silt trench was caved in, and the retaining wall looked like it had been hit with a wrecking ball driven by spite. The real punch? My trail cams. Every one gone, stolen or smashed. All mounts ripped from trees, brackets twisted off like someone went shopping for rage therapy. But I had planned for that. Backup drives, micro recorders sealed in a control box, fireproof, waterproof, Karen-proof. I bolted back to the shed and opened the housing like I was disarming a bomb. And there she was, on camera. Karen, in full regalia. HOA badge, clipboard, ice, coffee, and a megaphone. Yes, a megaphone. She announced it. "Clear it all," she said, pointing like Caesar over a sandbox. "This place is an eyesore. If you wanted a lake, you should have asked us first." Them two guys in orange vests, no company logos, no permits, cutting the gate chain with bolt cutters like it was a Black Friday sale. Moments later, a rented bobcat rolled in and started chewing into the base of the dam like it owed him money. One of the guys asked if they should wait for the landowner. Karen's response? "He's just some guy with a hill. He'll thank us later." By midnight, the clouds rolled in. By morning, the forecast changed from mild showers to record-breaking deluge with a sight of doom. NOAA issued a 7-day storm watch. Gulf moisture, stalled cold front, saturated soil. Perfect cocktail for disaster. And this time, the buffer zone that used to hold it all back had been reduced to a mud pit with a grudge. Then came the emails, HOA bulletins blasting out warnings of unstable terrain, possible flooding, and brace yourself, accusing me of removing the dam without proper authorization. I had to read it twice. According to Karen, I had dismantled my own engineered structure in a reckless and unsupervised manner, putting their homes at risk. Let that sink in. She had it torn down and blamed me for the water that hadn't even arrived yet. You think Karen's biggest mistake was destroying the dam? Nah, her biggest mistake was letting me survive to see it, because the rain hadn't even started falling when I decided we're going to court. And she's going to wish she drowned instead. By the third day, the ground was no longer ground. It was soup. Rain hit like it had something to prove, pounding roofs, windows, and egos with equal intensity. My gravel trail turned to oatmeal. Water was finding paths it hadn't explored in decades, cutting through soil like a drunk GPS, recalculating every few seconds. Briarwood Hills, that picturesque HOA nestled in the floodplain below, was about to learn why hydrology isn't just a word engineers use to sound important. I climbed a ridge every morning in my raincoat and boots, watching it all happen like a man monitoring a crime scene in slow motion. The gullies filled first, then the drains backed up. By the fourth night, just after 2:30 a.m., it happened. A sound like a tree snapping, but deeper, wetter, a low roar beneath the rain. I shot out of bed, grabbed my flashlight, and sprinted outside. The ridge was shaking, not metaphorically, literally trembling. As I reached the overlook, what I saw stopped me cold. Water, thick, brown, furious, was charging downhill like a monster freed from its cage. It tore through the upper HOA boundary like it was tissue paper. A 30-foot segment of the faux stone retaining wall collapsed like it was built from crackers. Behind it, Karen's backyard, formerly home to a koi pond and outdoor speakers, now a pit of swirling sludge. I saw one of her patio chairs float past like it was in a lazy river at Hales Water Park. And there she was, Karen, in a pink robe, screaming into a phone on her lawn while two firefighters approached in a rubber raft. Her hydrangeas were submerged. Her decorative birdhouse was drifting towards storm drain Valhalla, and her eyes locked with mine across the mess like she was trying to curse me with her soul. I waved. Then I pulled out my camera and hit record. I filmed everything, the water breaching the cul-de-sac, garden gnomes sailing off like Viking funerals, and trash bins doing laps around parked cars. I zoomed in on the retaining wall remnants, the overturned stonework, the bubbling manholes vomiting water like bad clams. One mailbox floated by with a soggy welcome, flag still barely hanging on. The next morning, emergency services swarmed the area. Utility trucks, first responders, clipboard armies, the kind of coordinated chaos that only arrives once something's gone terribly, gloriously wrong. I stayed back, out of sight, sipping hot coffee under my awning as the HOA scrambled like wet ants. Karen was still yelling, at who, I couldn't tell, at God, maybe. That afternoon, just as I was reviewing my footage and organizing the best angles by disaster intensity, someone knocked on my door. A steady, official knock. Not neighborly, not polite. I opened it to find a woman in a county-issued rain jacket and yellow boots, her clipboard already open. "You Clay McGraw?" she asked, pushing rain off her glasses. "Depends on who's asking," I said cautiously. "Emergency management," she replied, flipping a page. "Are you the property owner at parcel 42B? I nodded. "Yeah, that's mine." She tilted her head. "Did you at any point have a private flood retention structure on that slope?" My heart kicked up, not panic, just anticipation. I looked her in the eye, stepped aside, and motioned toward my dining table, already stacked with blueprints, video stills, and a flash drive labeled Karen's Greatest Flood Hits. "Ma'am," I said, "you might want to sit down for this." By Monday morning, the storm had passed, but the real flood was just beginning. Not water this time. Paperwork, allegations, legal posturing so thick you'd need a canoe to wade through the nonsense. And at the helm of it all, Karen clutching a 3-ring binder like it was the 10 Commandments rewritten in Comic Sans. They filed the lawsuit exactly 9 days after the flood, certified, embossed, and hand-delivered by some unfortunate intern in khakis who looked like he regretted every life decision that led him to this moment. The claim? That I had willfully dismantled a critical flood control structure, resulting in catastrophic loss, widespread property damage, and emotional duress throughout the Briarwood Hills community. Emotional duress from people who once complained my gravel path didn't match the neighborhood color palette. But here's where it got juicy. Because by suing me, the HOA had done something glorious. They'd admitted that the dam mattered. And that was legal dynamite. My attorney, Sarah, took one look at the complaint and actually giggled. They just confessed. The dam worked, she said, flipping pages like she was reading a bedtime story. "We're not just going to defend this. We're going to frame it, light it on fire, and serve it back with garnish." We filed the countersuit within 48 hours. charges: unlawful demolition of a permitted structure, trespassing, environmental code violations, and reckless endangerment of a residential floodplain during an active hydrological risk period. Translation: they bulldozed a working dam during storm season, lied about it, and blamed the one guy who had the blueprints. Meanwhile, the residents of Briarwood were starting to wake up, not metaphorically, but literally, as mold crept up drywall and insurance adjusters circled like vultures at a tailgate. A week later, the HOA held a community impact meeting at their clubhouse, which, in an ironic twist, had flooded just enough to warp the flooring, but not enough to cancel. I wasn't invited, didn't need to be, because apparently Vince from Lot 9, yes, the guy who once avoided eye contact at the feed store, stood up and asked the question everyone was too soggy to ignore. Why was a land alteration authorized without a vote? Karen tried to pivot, claimed it was an emergency aesthetic intervention. She said the dam was a rogue installation, a glorified pile of mud with no real purpose. But by then, the crowd had seen the footage. They'd watched her giving demolition orders with a latte in one hand and a megaphone in the other, like she was leading a parade of ignorance. Someone in the back muttered, "Is this what our dues pay for?" And that's when the room turned. Residents began shouting, demanding copies of the permits, asking if their homes were even insurable anymore. Karen's face tightened like a drawstring bag. Her voice cracked. She started blaming the board, then miscommunication, then the county, then somehow me again. And you know what? I didn't say a word, didn't storm in or drop a projector screen. I just waited, because truth has a gravity to it. And when the dam broke, so did the illusion. The funny thing, they called me a lunatic water hoarder last week. This week, I'm the only reason their basements weren't classified as indoor swimming pools sooner. The shift was happening, slowly, awkwardly, but undeniably. Karen was losing her grip, and the community was finally asking the right questions. And me, I had one more surprise up my sleeve, because the county wasn't done talking, and their next visit was going to change everything. Courtrooms don't usually smell like justice. They smell like bad coffee, old carpet, and air-conditioned anxiety. But on the day the HOA squared off against me, the whole place had the energy of a live-action reckoning. I showed up in a clean shirt and boots polished just enough to say, "I respect the court, but I'm not here to play." Karen showed up in pearls and a blazer that screamed "Innocence by..." Her lawyer looked like a man who'd Googled hydrology 5 minutes before opening arguments. We let them go first. The HOA painted me as a rogue landowner with a complex, a man who'd built a dam out of paranoia and vengeance, then tore it down to punish the neighborhood. Their slideshow included satellite images after the dam had been destroyed, of course, labeled as proof of noncompliance. They called the structure a hobby project. At one point, their counsel actually said it was just a pile of rocks, Your Honor. That line did not age well. Then it was our turn. Sarah, my attorney and chaos tactician, opened with drone footage. We played the video of Karen in high resolution, standing at my dam with her badge, iced coffee, and megaphone declaring, "Clear it all. This place is an eyesore." She looked visibly nauseous, watching herself bark orders like HOA Napoleon. Then came the audio clip, the one that cracked the whole room open. A contractor asking, "Shouldn't we get the owner's permission?" And Karen responded, "He doesn't live here. He'll thank us later." A juror in the front row actually muttered Jesus under his breath. We handed out laminated copies of every permit: county, water district, soil and drainage, each stamped, signed, dated. We brought out the hydrology report showing how the dam reduced downstream flood risk by 83%. We presented emails from HOA board members referring to the demolition as a cleanup job and Karen's pet project. The piece de resistance, meeting minutes from a week before the flood, containing the handwritten note, "Take care of the dam issue while he's gone." You can hear the courtroom inhale. And then we called one of the contractors to testify. Under oath, he admitted they were paid cash, no permits, no license, just instructions from the lady with the clipboard who told him it was decorative. When asked if he had concerns, he said, "Yeah, but she said the HOA owned everything down here. Said the guy on the hill didn't count." The jury didn't even look at him. They were already looking at Karen, and she looked like someone realizing the iceberg does hit back. By the time closing arguments wrapped, the judge didn't bother hiding his exhaustion. He ruled decisively. The HOA suit dismissed with prejudice, citing malicious prosecution and complete lack of merit. My countersuit, granted, 4 counts, unlawful demolition, property damage, environmental violations, and negligent endangerment. The HOA was found liable for full restitution. Then came the twist. Because their HOA insurance had an exemption for unpermitted independent board actions without full vote approval, which meant the $1,900,000, 0 cents in damages. It wasn't coming out of some magic HOA piggy bank. The judge ruled that each board member, Karen included, would be held personally liable for their share. I didn't cheer. I didn't smirk. I just sat there, listening to Karen's pearl necklace rattle ever so slightly as her hand shook. Outside, the clouds were breaking, but inside that courtroom, the storm had only just begun. For them, it didn't take long for the for sale sign to appear in Karen's yard. Though sign might be generous, it was one of those neon orange slabs of shame with motivated "Seller S is" written in bold all caps lettering that practically screamed desperation to passing squirrels. Rumor was she tried listing the house for full market value until an adjuster walked through and laughed loud enough to be heard by the neighbor's ring cam. Between the legal judgment, her drained savings, and a rejected second appeal, Karen was underwater in every sense of the word, emotionally, financially, and yes, quite literally, during last month's storm. The HOA? Gone, dissolved formally, by county order due to administrative negligence and gross misuse of authority. Their charter? Revoked. Their budget? Empty. Their community newsletter website now redirected to a spam domain selling ergonomic socks. And the best part? The judge had reclassified my property as an environmental buffer zone, officially outside the reach of any future HOA and untouchable by petty suburban politics. For the first time in years, no one left laminated notices on my gate. No flyers, no pink envelopes, no clipboard crusaders asking if my shed complied with aesthetic cohesion guidelines. It was quiet, blessedly, beautifully quiet. Then something unexpected happened. The neighbors came back, not with threats or suspicion, but with casseroles, tools, and a lot of silent apologies. Vince from Lot 9 showed up with a truckload of gravel. Martha, who used to glare at me like I was growing nuclear waste, brought muffins and laid French drain pipe like she was born for it. Even the Martinez twins, whose basement had become a mushroom habitat post-flood, showed up with rebar and better attitudes. Together we rebuilt the dam. This time it wasn't just mine. The retaining wall went up stone by stone, each one placed by a pair of hands that had once believed a laminated HOA rulebook could stop a flood. We reinforced the spillway, added a runoff basin, and installed a proper monitoring gauge system with solar backup. We laughed, we swore, we learned things about French drains we'll never unlearn, and no one asked for permission, because now they understood why it mattered. Once the last gravel field was packed and the flood channel redirected, I bolted in the final touch, a brushed aluminum plaque mounted beside the spillway. Nothing flashy, just silver on black. It read, "Next time, ask the guy who understands gravity." Below it, the permit number, hydrological specs, and an arrow pointing downstream, just in case anyone needed a reminder where the real danger flowed. I didn't throw a party, didn't give a speech, but I did host a cookout the first drive weekend afterward. People brought potato salad, folding chairs, and an awkward sort of kindness that only comes from collective trauma. We sat on the ridge looking down at the valley. You could still see scars, faint outlines of where the water had cut through like a scalpel, patches of new concrete, mud-stained fences. But the land was healing. So were the people. Funny how fast the tide turns. 1 month, you're the hillbilly menace with a dam complex. The next, you're the guy whose gravel saved foundations. Time and water both have a way of washing away the wrong things and revealing the right ones. Karen, last we heard, moved somewhere flat, some HOA-free suburb near Tulsa, where she reportedly runs a Facebook group about lawn etiquette and rants about squirrels. I wish her well. Sort of. As for me, I sleep better now. Not because storms stopped, but because I know what I built. and more importantly, who I built it with. They say water washes everything away, but sometimes, just sometimes, it clears things up. Now, here's the thing. This story wasn't just about a dam or an HOA meltdown. It was about how systems fail when we blindly follow titles and ignore common sense. Just because someone waves a clipboard doesn't mean they know what they're doing. Real leadership, it looks like accountability, not authority in life. Whether you're dealing with floodwater, office politics, or that one relative who thinks they run every family BBQ, the person who actually understands the problem is usually the one quietly doing the work, not the one yelling the loudest. So next time someone tells you it's always been this way, ask why. Then build your own damn wall, literally or figuratively. Thanks for sticking through the chaos with us. If you've ever faced your own HOA style drama or poetic justice moment, drop it in the comments. We read them all. Like, share, and subscribe if you're into stories where common sense finally wins.